Uckfield FM.
27 minutes now to 11. On the end of the phone must be, I think, probably one of the hardest working MPs in Parliament, because not only does she do a job as the constituency MP for Lewis, but she also does some shifts as a nurse. Maria Caulfield, welcome back. Hello.
Good morning. Good morning.
I think I'm not far off the mark there, because I don't know that there are many other MPs that are actually working within the NHS at the same time, are they?
Well, there's more than you think, actually, on all sides of the political spectrum. So there's Dr. Rosanna Allen-Khan, who's the MP for Tooting in South London. She works as a doctor in A&E. We've got Dr. Kieran Mullen, who's Conservative in Crewe. He is working as an A&E doctor. So there's more of us than you think, to be honest.
Yeah, are the government actually at all coming to you with for any sort of thoughts on how things really are, or is it just a case of they're just going with the experts at the top of the tree?
Yeah, I mean, I will always kind of feed in if I think there's problems with shortages of PPE, which, we haven't really experienced in my hospital. But, I do give them feedback about, what it's like on the front line. But to be honest, they've got some of, the world-class experts, Dr. Chris Whitty, Chief Medical Officer, who have been fantastic with their advice. So I think that they've got enough expertise around them without me chipping in every 5 minutes as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because lots of people read lots and lots of things, and you hear, dependent upon which newspaper you read or which news bulletin you see, you'll hear a slightly different take on things. But as someone who's actually working on the front line, what is it actually like?
Well, my hospital is traditionally a cancer hospital. It's the Royal Marsden in Surrey, but we do have 2 COVID wards at the moment, because obviously cancer patients can get the virus as well, and it's actually more important to kind of look after them, because a lot of them have no immune system, because the chemotherapy that they've been having has wiped out their immune system, so they're at particular risk. So what happens at the moment is, we're looking after patients, and if there's a suspicion that they've got coronavirus, they're obviously tested. If they're found to be positive, then they move on to the COVID wards, where they're separated from the other patients as well. So, it's a difficult time, because staff are affected as well. So there's lots of staff who are having to go into self-isolation, either because they've got symptoms or a family member's got symptoms. So there's a lot of pressure there in terms of, on the existing staff to look after patients, look after COVID patients, which is a steep learning curve with all the PPE you have to put on, all the self-isolation of the various patients on the wards, and then coping while, routine members of staff are not available. So there's a positive kind of spirit on the wards, for sure. Everyone's kind of, working together as a really strong team. But of course, everyone's nervous. They wonder if this is the shift you're going to pick up the virus yourself today. And the media headlines have really not helped. When you see that there's, a shortage of PPE, you go onto that shift wondering if you're going to get a mask or a glove or an apron. And actually, certainly in my hospital, there has been plenty of PPE. And I just don't think the media sometimes realise the worry that they cause people who are right on the front line, who are thinking, will I have enough protection when I go into work today? Is today the day I get the virus? Good spirits, but a lot of nervousness as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because there was actually news of that exact situation of shortage of PPE being reported at the DGH in Eastbourne, which of course is local for both you and us here at Uckfield FM, really. I don't know what was going on behind that. Was that newspaper bluster, or was there some element of truth to all of that?
Well, I really challenged the journalist who contacted me to say, the Eastbourne Hospital was running out of PPE, there was nothing left. And I asked who he'd spoken to, and he wouldn't say. So I, that night, that minute, I contacted Dr. Adrian Bull, who's the chief executive, a clinical doctor as well, who was actually still working on the front line late at night. And he said there's absolutely, they've got all the PPE they need. And he had to put out a statement, in fact, because this journalist had, kind of put this story out there. And Adrian wanted to reassure all the staff, all the patients, all the relatives of staff and patients that they had enough PPE. And that's really, for me, I found that, really disgusting journalism that, that he put that story out there. He hadn't checked the facts and caused a lot of upset and angst, and also taking up the time of someone who, is trying to run a hospital and is having to step away to answer some unfounded, suggestions.
Yeah, it's worrying that this kind of thing is actually happening, and it does make it very difficult because there are so many rumours, truths and lies flying around on various different forms of the media, be it social media, be it newspapers, be it anywhere else, really, that makes it very, very difficult for the public to actually get to grips with what's actually going on. But the other thing that has been going on, that has been reported in the papers, is that, and of course this is probably where the worry is for you and your colleagues, is that there are a number of NHS staff who've actually died from the coronavirus. What's the government going to be doing to actually support those families?
Well, anyone who dies in service in the NHS does get a package, a financial package of support. But obviously, that's sometimes, some of the people who've died have got very young families and who are financially dependent on them. So, any NHS worker who dies in service, is usually looked after in a financial sense. But obviously, it's far more than a financial, situation for the family members who are left behind. The government have been really clear there will be support for those families. You cannot underestimate, how difficult it is for them that they've lost a loved one who, for the simple reason of just going out to do their job, caught the virus and, then sadly died. And that's why the government has ramped up so much getting the PPE in so that everyone else who's working in the NHS in social care, frontline workers, has the protection that they need, and is now rolling out, mass testing for all key workers, because, the government takes really seriously the responsibility it has to look after people who are, quite frankly, putting their lives on the line by going out to work. And so, there will be support for those families who've, sadly lost loved ones, but there also will be, as we're seeing at the moment, ramping up of support for existing frontline workers to make sure that, there will be more, I'm sure, that will sadly die, because that's the nature of the virus, but that those numbers are kept as low as possible.
All we can do is hope and pray that those that are working on the front line actually stay as safe as they possibly can. The other people that are working pretty much on the front line that don't get quite the same amount of attention as the NHS staff are those that work in care homes. And there have been, again, differing reports there of the lack of PPE or the lack of protective equipment generally in that particular industry, and a rather large degree of fear amongst those who are actually working there. What's happening with those people?
Yeah, so I've been working pretty closely with a lot of my local care homes. The issue is that, unlike the NHS that has a central procurement service, in peacetime, so, can very easily ramp that up when we have an epidemic or a pandemic. Social care is very, very fragmented. We've got care homes that are run by the local authority. We've got private care homes. We've got residential homes. We've got people who live at home and have carers come in. So there isn't a kind of one-size-fits-all for the care sector. And then to try and, there isn't a central register of where care is provided. It's very haphazard in nature. So to try and then make sure all of those people who provide care are covered in, literally a couple of weeks and get out to them and get deliveries to them is, a much more difficult process. But the system that's in place now is we have what's called a local resilience forum for Sussex, which covers East Sussex, West Sussex and Brighton and Hove, who feed into the government how much PPE those care homes or people who have carers in their home or sheltered housing, how much they need. That then gets filtered down to the relevant county council or Brighton and Hove unitary authority, who then pass it on then to those care homes. But it has been a logistical nightmare because those processes have never been in place before now, unlike the NHS. and the Army have been helping the local resilience forum in getting those logistics distributions out to those places. So it hasn't been as smooth as the NHS, which has had difficulties of its own, but it is a very, very complex system. But talking to my care homes, the PPE is getting through now. They do have the supplies. They are getting regular deliveries. And if there are care homes who maybe kind of fallen through the net, then if they contact their local MP, so it's me in Lewis or Nuz in Wealdon or Hugh Merriman or Caroline Ansell, contact us and we can get them into the system because, while we've tried, to cover everyone, there will be care providers who we are not aware of in a private capacity that may not be in the system yet. But there is a robust system now for getting them PPE.
So the PPE is now becoming much more readily available than it was alleged it was, say, a week or so ago.
Yeah, there's definitely, talking to my care homes, 10 days ago, they were literally had maybe 2 days supply left and were not sure where the next supplies were coming from. That should have been resolved now because there is a proper, robust system that mimics what happens in the NHS. And, they were working on a demand model. Mm-hmm. So literally waiting for people to say, I need 10 boxes of gloves, 20 boxes of aprons or whatever. Now they're working on a push model where you will get your deliveries whether you ask for it or not. And then, hopefully there should be a continuous flow rather than running short and then thinking, where am I going to get the next lot from? So, there's been huge amounts of lessons learned around this, but the care sector is a very fragmented. It's not a national care service, unlike a national health service, and that has provided logistical difficulties across the country.
Yeah, there are lots and lots of questions that need answers in all of this. Some of these will come much later when I'm guessing that we'll take a look back at all of this and see how things could have been done, whether we did things right or not. But the question at the moment seems to be that from a lot of people, is that we're running behind what lots of other countries have done, to the point where, say, the third question that I have that's been sent in this morning was, it actually says the UK accounts for less than 1% of the global population. Why does it account for over 10% of the global deaths? Again, accuracy, I think, might be needed in some of that, but I'm guessing we're not far short of the correct figure there, are we? And why?
Well, if you look at, and we are told by the experts not to compare with other countries because there's varying factors in terms of, do we really believe China only had 3,000 deaths, for example? So there is the accuracy issue and how deaths are recorded in different countries. So you're not comparing apples with apples. But, we are doing better than places like France and Italy and Spain who, tragically had such, a hard time. We have capacity in the NHS. I think we've got over 2,000 beds, ITU ventilator beds available should we need it. So we do. We obviously have lessons to learn, and we are learning from places like Italy and Spain and China, for example, about how they're coming out of the lockdown. And that's why you're seeing a change from the government in the last 24 hours around mass testing and tracing of people, because we will be going back to that as the numbers start to come down to try and, stop outbreaks happening in local areas. But actually, I think this country has done pretty well because, the big fear was that the NHS would not be able to cope. We all saw the pictures in Italy where they had patients lying in corridors, where the mortuaries couldn't cope, where care homes were abandoned. There were people found dead in care homes because the staff had abandoned them. We've not had that here. We've not had it easy. There have been, terrible, situations for families who've not been able to be with loved ones as they die. It's not been easy. But actually, I think, the NHS has really, really been able to stand up to the challenge and, and has capacity should we have a spike in the number of people coming into hospital or people... Yeah.
Have we traded off, though, other illnesses for the tragedy that is COVID-19? I mean, there are lots of people out there who are not receiving cancer treatments and not getting the medical attention that they need because the NHS's total focus is on the NHS. I have personal experience of that one, by the way, but that's another story. But we seem to be that the NHS has got one focus, which I can't say is particularly wrong, but it does mean that lots of other people are not getting the attention, and therefore the death rates may be different because of that.
Well, there's two parts to that. Firstly, we have to make sure that patients coming in for other treatments, whether it's heart disease, cancer, strokes, are safe. And we have to make sure that our hospitals, have COVID under control. So, for example, in my hospital, there's 2 COVID wards and only COVID patients will go there. The other wards are delivering cancer treatment. So at the weekend, I was giving chemotherapy to patients. There were patients who were in there who had infections because of their chemotherapy, not because they were COVID patients. So other treatments are happening. And this is the message the NHS really wants to get out, that it is business as usual. So if you do have chest pain, if you do lose your speech or get a sudden left arm, right arm weakness, you must go to hospital. A&E is open for business as usual. And so we are trying to encourage people to, if they have got other health conditions, to go and, contact your GP, make a telephone call, and the GP can arrange a surgery visit or a telephone consultation. Do go to A&E. So we're trying to create cancer hubs who will be COVID-free places where cancer surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy can start. But we have to make sure that those patients are safe, because if you're having a procedure, like a bypass or a pacemaker, you are going to be more at risk of picking up an infection. So we have to make sure that people are safe and the hospitals and clinics that they're going into are safe. But, there is not we're not doing business as usual. That really isn't the case. And I know people think it is, but we want people to still be seeking medical attention if they're not well.
Okay, finally, then the boss, Boris Johnson's alleged to be back at work on Monday. Are we likely to see anything towards an exit strategy forming and some information coming out about that next week?
So I think people think that there's going to be like a light switch moment where we flick off lockdown and everyone returns to normal. That's not going to happen. This is going to be a slow burn process. And you started to see what's going to happen announced by Matt Hancock yesterday. So there will be mass testing and there will be mass tracing, so that if someone gets a symptom, whoever they've been in contact with in the last 14 days will also be traced back. So that's the sort of exit process that you'll start to see. And there will be the slowly opening up of different parts of the community. I don't know which ones are going to be open first, whether it's schools or nurseries or whatever, but that will happen really slowly, and we will wait and see then what happens with the number of infections and the number of deaths. Then if they're stable, we open up the next bit. So there's not going to be a light switch moment where we say to everyone, right, all back to work. That's not the exit strategy that's going to happen. This is going to be a slow burn over a number of months.
So, I don't think anybody expected there to be business as usual. It was just that I know many opposition politicians, and even now some Conservative members are actually calling for some degree of announcement on how we start to move forward. And I think you've pretty much just answered that. I'm guessing it'd be nice to see Boris Johnson back at work on Monday, would it?
Yeah, we're all, looking forward to seeing him come back, but it's really important that he takes the time off to rest. The easiest thing, and I know this for all patients, particularly cancer patients, is when they finish their treatment, they literally want to get back to normal. And sometimes that's the worst thing you can do, because I always say to my patients, just go back slowly and build yourself up, because once you're back, people soon forget how poorly you were. And it's much harder then to say, actually, I've gone back a bit too soon, I'm doing too much. and it's much harder then to withdraw and go back to a kind of part-time basis. So my advice, if the Prime Minister is listening, is to make sure he's 100% ready, because it will be full on from pretty much the day one when he comes back. So we all want him back, but must make sure that his health absolutely comes first.
Challenging and uncertain times for all of us, and I'm sure for you too, Maria Caulfield. Thank you so much for talking to us this morning. Thank you for your efforts, and all we can say really is stay safe, and we'll catch up with you in a month's time.
Yeah, stay safe, everyone, and enjoy the sunshine from your back gardens, or we'll all be able to enjoy it sooner if we kind of stick with the rules in the short term.
Thank you, Maria. Cheers. We'll talk to you in a month.